Emily Harper's Saturday mornings usually followed a simple rhythm. A slow wake-up, coffee brewing in the corner of her small kitchen, and the hum of her favorite old jazz records drifting lazily through the apartment. As a nurse working long and unpredictable hours at Dayton General, she cherished these rare mornings when no alarms pulled her from sleep before sunrise. But that particular Saturday in late June was different, though she didn't yet realize how different. 2 days earlier, a colleague had begged her to swap shifts. "My daughter's recital is Saturday morning," he explained, desperation edging his voice. Emily, tired but empathetic, agreed. That meant she had worked late into the night Friday instead, her shift running past midnight. She should have been home sleeping until noon, curtains drawn, coffee untouched. Instead, she was up early again, dragged out by her sister Rachel, who insisted she join her for a trip to the local farmer's market. "Come on, Em," Rachel teased as she leaned against Emily's doorway, bags slung over her shoulder. "It's beautiful out. Fresh peaches, live music, and you're always saying you don't get enough sunlight. Don't be a hermit." Emily groaned, sipping the lukewarm remains of last night's coffee. "I worked 12 hours straight. My sunlight can wait." But Rachel's persistence wore her down, as it usually did. Soon Emily found herself walking down 5th Street toward the buzzing square, her tote bag empty and swinging at her side. The morning sun stretched long golden, beams across brick buildings, and the air carried the mingled scents of roasted peanuts, fresh bread, and early summer blooms. The Dayton Farmers Market was alive with chatter. Vendors called out greetings, their tables stacked with baskets of strawberries, jars of honey, and handmade candles. Children ran between stalls, tugging at parents' hands, their laughter rising above the clatter of footsteps and bicycle bells. Musicians played a cheerful tune on the corner, the twang of a banjo weaving through the hum of conversation. Emily breathed deeply, feeling an unexpected calm settle over her. She loved places like this, where neighbors greeted one another with familiarity and strangers exchanged smiles over produce. In the hospital, life often meant blood, urgency, and beeping machines. Here, life looked simpler, slower farmers proud of their harvests, bakers carefully slicing samples of bread, families debating over flowers for the kitchen table. She and Rachel wandered the aisles together, pausing at a stall with mason jars, filled with jam. "You need blackberry," Rachel insisted, holding up a jar as though it were treasure. "Mom swears it's the cure for everything: bad days, broken hearts, maybe even hangovers." Emily chuckled, shaking her head. "I think Mom just likes sugar." Still, she slipped the jar into her tote. By the time they reached the middle of the market, her bag was half full: strawberries, candles, a loaf of sourdough still warm from the oven. Rachel wandered off to examine pottery, while Emily lingered by a table lined with soy candles. She leaned down, inhaling the scent of lavender and eucalyptus, her shoulders finally beginning to loosen. For once, she wasn't rushing. She wasn't worrying about charts or patience or missed sleep. She was just Emily, one of many faces in a Saturday crowd. Yet as she stood there, savoring the calm, something in her chest stirred a faint unease. She couldn't quite name. It wasn't traumatic, just a fleeting thought that she shouldn't even be here. If she hadn't switched shifts, if Rachel hadn't insisted, she'd still be at home, curled under blankets, maybe dreaming away the morning. Life has a way of arranging moments, like puzzle pieces, placing people in places they never expected. Emily would think about that later, long after the market was changed forever. For now, the day felt unremarkable in its ordinariness. She adjusted the strap of her tote and glanced toward Rachel, who was laughing with a vendor over a ceramic mug shaped like a cow. The banjo player's tune shifted into something faster, children clapping along. The crowd swelled as more people arrived. sunlight glinting off jars of honey and polished apples. Emily found herself smiling at a little boy chasing bubbles blown by a street performer. His giggles rang out, drawing amused looks from nearby shoppers. For a fleeting second, she felt the rare kind of happiness that comes when everything seems untouched by worry or fear. She checked her watch. Still early. They had time to browse a few more stalls, maybe grab coffee before heading home. She turned back toward the candle display, her fingers tracing the labels, debating which scent might make her small apartment feel less like an extension of the hospital. That's when it happened. A sound split the air. Sharp, deafening, unmistakable. A gunshot. For half a heartbeat, the world seemed confused by it. People froze, eyes darting, as if trying to fit the noise into something familiar. Fireworks, maybe, or a car backfiring. But then came the scream. A raw, piercing cry that tore through the air and shattered the illusion of safety. Emily's head snapped toward the sound. Not far from the fruit stand, a man staggered, his shirt blooming red. He crumpled to the ground. A bag of apples he'd been carrying scattering across the pavement. The crowd erupted in chaos. Vendors ducked behind tables. Parents clutched children. People shoved desperately toward exits. The air, once filled with laughter and music, turned heavy with panic. Rachel grabbed Emily's arm. "We have to go," she shouted, her voice high with fear. But Emily didn't move. Her training screamed louder than fear. A man was bleeding, collapsing before her eyes. Somewhere nearby, children were crying, a mother calling out for help. Every instinct inside her, every lesson drilled into her as a nurse, pulled her forward. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her feet carried her toward the chaos. Toward the fallen man, toward the danger. She wasn't supposed to be there. She could have been home, safe in bed, coffee brewing in her kitchen. Yet she was here. And in the space of a single gunshot, Emily Harper's ordinary Saturday morning had become the moment her courage would be tested like never before. The sound still echoed in Emily's ears as she rushed forward, cutting against the tide of people fleeing. The gunshot had ripped through the hum of the farmer's market like lightning across a clear sky, splitting what had been ordinary into something fractured and terrifying. Around her, panic bloomed like wildfire. A man shoved past with a child clutched against his chest. Vendors abandoned their tables, jars and baskets spilling across the ground as they scrambled for cover. A stroller tipped sideways in the chaos, its wheels spinning, the infant inside wailing until a woman swept it up and ran. Emily's breath caught, but her body moved. She was a nurse. She'd been trained for emergencies, for blood, for moments, when decisions had to be made quickly. Yet never in her life had she stepped into something so raw, so uncontrolled, without the walls of a hospital or the presence of a team. She spotted him, a man who had collapsed near the fruit stand. His groceries lay scattered, apples rolling across the pavement, some crushed under the stampede of retreating feet. He lay sprawled on his back, his shirt soaked with spreading crimson. Her feet pounded the pavement as she crossed the distance, dropping to her knees beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice steady though her hands trembled. His eyes were half open, dazed, lips parted as shallow breaths rattled in his chest. Blood, so much blood. Emily tore the scarf from her neck, balling it quickly and pressing it hard against the wound near his shoulder. The warmth soaked through instantly, searing her skin, but she leaned her full weight into it. "Stay with me," she urged. "Help is coming." Behind her, the chaos hadn't stopped. She heard the sharp sob of a woman's voice. "My baby. Please someone help." The sound made Emily's head snap around. Just feet away, a young mother crouched low, shielding two small children beneath her arms. One of the children clutched. his arm, blood streaking down to his wrist. The mother's face was pale, frozen between terror and indecision, her eyes darting between Emily and the exits as though torn between staying and running. Emily's heart raced faster. She wanted to be in two places at once, wanted to help them all, but the man beneath her hand gave a weak groan that yanked her focus back. The bleeding hadn't slowed. She needed pressure, needed more hands. "Hey!" she called out, raising her voice above the din. A teenage boy stood frozen a few yards away, clutching a shopping bag, his face pale. "You! Come here, press down right here. Hard, don't let go." He hesitated, shaking his head, eyes wide with fear. "You won't hurt him." Emily shouted, her tone sharp, commanding. "You'll save him. Do it." Something in her voice must have broken through his fear. The boy stumbled forward, dropping his bag of oranges, and placed both hands where she guided him. Emily covered his trembling hands with her own, making sure he felt the firmness of pressure. "Good. Don't stop, no matter what. Keep pressing." The boy nodded frantically, tears brimming in his eyes, but he held steady. Emily rose, scanning the scene for anything cloth, jackets, towels that could become supplies. "Call 911. She yelled toward the crowd, catching sight of a woman crouched behind a nearby stall. "Tell them multiple victims, gunshot wounds. We need ambulances now." The woman fumbled with her phone, fingers shaking, but began speaking into it. Emily turned back toward the mother with the children. "You," she said, moving quickly to them. "Let me see his arm." The little boy whimpered as she gently pulled his hand away, revealing a gash along his upper arm. It wasn't as deep as the man's wound, but it bled freely. Emily tore open her tote bag, pulling out the clean cloth that had been wrapped around her bread. She folded it tight and tied it around the boy's arm, knotting it firmly to slow the bleeding. "You're safe," she whispered, brushing his hair back. "I've got you." The mother's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I didn't know what." "Stay low. Keep pressure here. Don't move until help arrives," Emily instructed firmly. Another scream cut across the square. This one came from near the bakery cart, where a man lay clutching his leg, blood pumping through his jeans. Emily's mind raced. That made 3 victims, now possibly more hidden in the chaos. And still, no sign of the shooter. She ducked instinctively, scanning the crowd. Police sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but she knew seconds mattered. Fear clawed at her chest. What if another shot rang out? What if she was next? But she forced the thoughts away. She couldn't freeze. These people needed her. Emily ran to the man by the bakery, kneeling beside him. "Can you hear me?" "Where's the pain?" My leg," he gasped, clutching at the soaked denim. "Okay, we're going to stop the bleeding. You're going to be okay." She looked up, spotting 2 teenage girls cowering behind a bench. "You come here. Take this belt, wrap it above his knee, pull it tight." They stared at her, unmoving. "Now!" she barked, her voice sharper than she'd ever heard it. The girls scrambled forward, hands shaking as they did what she told them. Emily guided them, tightening the makeshift tourniquet until the bleeding slowed. The man groaned, but his breathing steadied. "You're doing amazing," she told the girls. "Don't let go. He needs you." Around them, the market was still chaos, but a fragile order had begun to emerge. People who moments ago had been paralyzed with fear were responding to her voice, following directions, helping in small but crucial ways. Emily barely noticed the sweat dripping down her temple, the way her arms trembled from adrenaline. Her world had narrowed to the circle of people bleeding in front of her, the desperate need to keep them alive until trained help arrived. She didn't think about where the shooter was. She didn't think about her own safety. She thought only of pulses, pressure, and breath. For Emily Harper, the nurse who wasn't supposed to be there, the farmer's market had become her emergency room. And she was the only one on duty. The man beneath Emily's hands let out a low groan, his eyelids fluttering. His chest rose in shallow, uneven breaths, each one sounding like a struggle against an invisible weight. Blood seeped around the scarf she had pressed into his shoulder, warm and sticky against her palms. Emily leaned harder, using the strength of her body instead of just her hands. She knew enough to recognize the danger: arterial bleeding. He didn't have long. "Stay with me," she urged, her voice steady, though her stomach twisted. "You're going to be okay. Help is on the way." His lips parted, but no words came, only a weak exhale that carried the scent of iron and fear. Emily glanced up at the boy she had recruited to hold pressure. His knuckles were white, his hands shaking violently as he pressed down where she guided him. His eyes darted everywhere, wide with terror. "You're doing good," she told him firmly. "Don't stop pressing. No matter what, keep the pressure. Steady. You're saving his life." The boy nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks, but his grip didn't falter. Emily tore her gaze away and scanned the chaos around her. Every sense felt sharpened, hyper-aware. A woman screamed from somewhere in the crowd. A crash of wood echoed as a stall collapsed under the rush of fleeing bodies, and the faint wail of approaching sirens teased her ears. Still too far. The mother with the 2 children crouched nearby, both kids sobbing. The older child clutched his injured arm, blood streaking his small fingers. Emily's heart ached at the sight, but she forced her mind into focus. Panic couldn't help them. Action could. "Mom," Emily called, her voice cutting through the noise. "I'm coming to you." She crawled the few feet, keeping low, until she reached them. The mother's face was pale, almost gray, her breaths coming fast and shallow. She looked at Emily as though she were a lifeline. "My baby, he's bleeding. I don't know what to do," she stammered. Emily placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone. We'll fix this." She gently took the child's arm, examining the gash. The cut was long, but not deep enough to be immediately fatal. Still, blood flowed steadily, and the boy whimpered when she touched it. "Hey, buddy," Emily said softly, lowering her voice to soothe him. "I know it hurts, but I'm going to make it better. Can you be brave for me?" He sniffled, nodding weakly. Emily rummaged through her tote bag, finding the clean cloth that had been wrapped around the loaf of bread she'd bought earlier. She folded it tightly, wrapping it around the boy's arm, and tied it into a makeshift bandage. Then she pressed firmly, just above the wound, slowing the flow. "There," she said, giving him an encouraging smile. "That's going to help until the doctors arrive. You did amazing." The mother's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you. Thank you. I didn't know what to do. You're doing everything right by staying with them," Emily assured her. "Keep him calm. Hold pressure here." She guided the mother's hand onto the boy's arm. "Don't let go until someone takes over." The woman nodded frantically, clutching her child close. Emily pushed to her feet, her knees aching from the pavement, and turned back toward the first man. His breaths were still shallow, but steady for now. The teenager kept pressure as instructed, his lips pressed tight in concentration. "Good job," she said quickly. "Keep holding it." Another cry cut through the air. Emily's head snapped toward the bakery stall, where she saw the man with the injured leg threshing weakly, 2 frightened teenage girls hovering uselessly nearby. His jeans were soaked, blood pooling beneath him. She ran over, kneeling beside him. "Sir, I'm here," she said, her voice calm, commanding. "We're going to stop the bleeding." He groaned, his hand gripping his thigh in desperation. Emily unbuckled her belt, in one swift motion. "Girls," she said sharply to the teenagers, "I need you. Take this belt, wrap it high above his knee, and pull as tight as you can. Do it now." They froze, staring at her with wide, tear-filled eyes. "You can do this," Emily insisted, her voice leaving no room for doubt. "If you don't, he'll bleed too much. Wrap it and pull hard." The girls scrambled into action, fumbling but managing to loop the belt around the man's thigh. Emily guided their trembling hands, showing them how to tighten it until the blood flow slowed. The man cried out in pain, but she placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know it hurts, but this will save you. Stay with me." The girls looked at her, still terrified, but something in her steady tone grounded them. They pressed down, following her instructions. "You're helping," Emily told them firmly. "Don't let go." The sirens were louder now, closer. Relief stirred in her chest, but she couldn't slow down yet. She scanned the market again, searching for anyone else who might be hurt. Her eyes caught an older man slumped against a stall, his face pale, lips tinged blue. He wasn't bleeding visibly, but his shallow breaths and glassy eyes told her shock was setting in. Emily rushed to him, kneeling. "Sir, can you hear me?" He moaned faintly, barely conscious. She grabbed a nearby crate, propping his legs up to improve circulation, then pulled off her jacket to cover him. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You're going to be all right." Around her, the chaos was still palpable, people shouting, children crying, the sharp tang of fear thick in the air, but something had shifted. Where before there had been only panic, now there was fragile cooperation. People who had been frozen were moving, helping, following her lead. Emily felt her heart hammering, adrenaline surging, but she kept her voice calm, steady, every word intentional. She wasn't just treating wounds. She was holding together the fragile thread of hope in a moment when despair threatened to unravel. Everything, her scarf soaked crimson, her tote bag emptied of its simple contents, repurposed as medical supplies, her body shaking with effort. And still, she moved, because she had to. Because fate had put her here, and lives now depended on her. Emily's pulse thudded so hard, it felt like a drumbeat inside her ears. Sweat stung her eyes, her clothes stuck to her skin, and her hands slick with other people's blood shook each time she moved from one victim to the next. Yet somehow, her voice carried strength she didn't feel. "Keep pressure," she shouted to the teenage boy tending the man with the chest wound. His terrified expression hadn't changed, but his hands stayed locked firmly in place, knuckles white with strain. "Don't stop until someone takes over." Nearby, a young mother clutched her child's bandaged arm, rocking him as though her embrace alone could shield him from the terror around them. Emily forced herself to breathe in slow, deliberate bursts. Panic clawed at the edges of her mind, whispering that she was only one person, that there were too many injuries, too much blood. But she shoved it down. She couldn't afford panic. She needed clarity. Another cry rose from behind her, the man with the leg wound. His breathing had turned shallow, ragged. The makeshift belt tourniquet slowed the bleeding, but pain racked his body, his hands clawing at the ground. Emily hurried back, kneeling at his side. The teenage girls who had helped him before were trembling but still pressing down as she'd instructed. "You're doing great," Emily told them, her tone calm, encouraging. "But he needs reassurance too." She leaned close to the injured man. "I know it hurts, but you're safe now. We've slowed the bleeding. Ambulances are coming." His eyes darted to hers, glassy with fear. Don't let me die." "You're not going to die," Emily said, her voice steady even though her insides twisted. "I won't let that happen." The girls looked at her, eyes wide, as though clinging to the certainty in her tone. In truth, Emily knew nothing. was guaranteed. But sometimes, hope was as important as pressure on a wound. Both kept people alive. A crash made her flinch. A vendor's table toppled nearby, glass jars shattering across the pavement. A man trying to flee had stumbled into it, too frantic to notice the shards slicing his arm as he pushed himself back up. He looked at the cut, then at Emily. She didn't hesitate. Press something clean against it. A shirt, a towel, anything. Hold it tight until paramedics arrive. The man obeyed, clutching his ripped sleeve to the wound. Emily turned back to her cluster of patients, the gravity of the scene sinking in. 4 people under her watch, each at different stages of danger, each depending on her voice, her hands, her presence. And still, in the back of her mind, one thought lingered. Where is the shooter? She hadn't heard another shot since the first. Had the gunman fled? Been caught? Or was he still somewhere nearby, hidden among the chaos? The thought made her chest tighten, but she forced her focus back to the injured. She couldn't protect them from bullets. She could only protect them from bleeding out. "Hey!" someone shouted. A man in a baseball cap rushed over, crouching. Beside her, "I've got first aid training. What do you need?" Relief coursed through her like water. "Good," she said quickly. "Check that man-leg wound, tourniquet in place. Keep pressure. Watch his breathing. Don't let him pass. Out." The man nodded and took over, freeing Emily to check the elderly victim slumped near the bread cart. His face was still pale, his breath shallow. She touched his wrist, feeling for a pulse weak, but there. She kept his legs elevated and pulled. Another discarded jacket over him to preserve warmth. "Stay with me, sir," she whispered. "Help is almost here." Her ears caught the sirens again, louder now, the sound threading through the air like a promise. They were close, but close wasn't here. Emily looked around at the haphazard circle of patients she'd collected. The square that had been so full of laughter minutes ago now looked like a battlefield blood on the pavement. Stalls overturned, food and glass crushed under frantic feet. Bystanders peered cautiously from behind walls and vehicles, some whispering, some crying. And in the middle of it, Emily knelt, her clothes stained, her hair clinging to her damp forehead, orchestrating survival like a conductor of chaos. Hands ached, her knees burned, but she didn't stop. "Check his pulse again," she called to the man in the cap. "Still there," he replied, glancing up. "Good. Keep talking to him. Don't let him drift." The teenager with the chest wound victim whimpered. "I can't my arms." "Yes, you can," Emily said firmly, locking eyes with him. "Look at me. You're strong enough. Just a little longer." He nodded, swallowing hard, and held. "Steady." The little boy with the bandaged arm cried quietly into his mother's chest. Emily wanted to kneel beside him, to promise him everything would be okay, but there was no time. She could only offer brief reassurances, moving constantly, from one life to another like a fragile thread holding the scene together. She was exhausted already, yet adrenaline pushed her forward. Nurses knew this rhythm tired, but unstoppable when lives demanded it. Only this time, there were no sterile rooms, no medical equipment, no team. Just her, strangers, and whatever. Scraps of cloth and courage they could muster. Where are they? Someone shouted, voice breaking. "Where are the ambulances?" Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. All she could do was keep going. The sirens grew louder, echoing through the streets until the sound consumed everything. Relief surged in Emily's chest. She kept her hands moving, her voice steady, until finally, the flash of red and blue lights cut through the smoke of panic. Uniformed officers and paramedics poured into the square, shouting commands, assessing the scene with practiced precision. Emily sagged slightly, but didn't let go of the elderly man's wrist until a paramedic crouched beside her. "We've got him," the medic said gently, placing a hand on her arm. She nodded, finally releasing the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands trembled as she pulled back, blood drying on her skin, her heart pounding in her throat. They were safe now, or at least safer than they'd been moments before. For the first time since the gunshot, Emily allowed herself to feel it, the crash of exhaustion, the fear she'd buried, the trembling in her legs. But even through it, a quiet truth settled inside her. She had been here when it mattered. She had done what needed to be done. And 4 lives still clung to their futures, because she had refused to stand frozen. The market smelled different now. Not of peaches and kettle corn, but of blood, sweat, and the metallic edge of fear. Emily's tote bag once, swinging lightly against her hip, filled with bread, candles, and jam, was empty. Every item inside had been stripped away and repurposed. The bread cloth had become a bandage, her scarf pressed against a chest wound, a belt tightened around a mangled leg. Even the jacket she'd draped over the elderly man was gone, used to shield his body. From shock, Emily knelt beside him again. His skin was clammy, his breath shallow and uneven. His eyes rolled slightly, unfocused, as if he were slipping away into a place she couldn't reach. "Sir, stay with me," she said softly but firmly, her hand resting on his thin shoulder. "You're not alone." She propped his legs higher on a crate, improvising with whatever she could find. A vendor's apron, abandoned in the chaos, became another cover over his chest. She placed her hand against his wrist. His pulse flickered beneath her fingers, faint but there. He murmured something, lips trembling. Emily leaned closer, straining to catch the words. "Don't let me go." Her throat tightened. "I won't," she promised. "I'm right here." Around her, the chaos had shifted into something eerie. The fleeing crowd had thinned, leaving behind scattered belongings, broken stalls, and a silence interrupted only by sobs and sirens. The immediate threat felt distant now, though the fear lingered like smoke in the air. Emily glanced at her. Patience, the man with the chest wound, still held steady by the teenage boy. The child clinging to his mother, the leg victim supported by the man in the cap. 4 lives. 4 fragile threads, each tethered by desperate improvisation. And in the middle of it, strangers were beginning to look at her, not just with fear, but with expectation. "Tell me what to do," the vendor whose table had collapsed said suddenly, crouching near her. His arm bore shallow cuts from the glass, but his eyes were clear, steady now. "I can help." Emily didn't hesitate. "Good, stay with him," she said, nodding to the elderly man. "If he drifts off, talk to him. Keep him awake. Keep his legs elevated." The vendor nodded, settling beside the man and taking his hand. It struck Emily then how quickly roles had shifted. Just minutes ago, these people were shoppers, vendors, teenagers on a Saturday morning. Now, under her voice, they were a teen. Her chest ached with exhaustion, but her mind wouldn't allow her to stop. She moved back to the mother and child, checking the bandage she had tied. The cloth was saturated with blood, but the flow had slowed. "You're doing great," she told the mother, who clutched her son tightly, tears streaking her cheeks. "He's so small," the woman whispered. I thought he was going to." Emily squeezed her hand. "He's still here, because of you. Keep holding pressure." The woman nodded, gripping the boy's arm as though she'd never let go. Emily forced herself up again, her knees screaming from the pavement. Her body felt heavy, trembling with adrenaline, but there was no space for her own pain. Every time she looked into the eyes of those around her, eyes filled with fear but clinging to her words, she knew she couldn't stop. The elderly man groaned, his hand twitching against the vendor's grip. Emily hurried back. His face was paler now, lips bluish. Shock was tightening its grip. She leaned close, speaking directly into his ear. "Stay with me, sir. You've made it this far. Don't quit now." His eyes fluttered open slightly, focusing on her. For a brief second, she saw it, the fragile spark of life, holding on. "You're safe," she whispered. He blinked once, weak but deliberate. Her throat constricted. She wanted to cry, to let the emotion of the moment spill out, but she didn't. She couldn't. They all needed her steady. Around them, whispers spread. People crouched behind stalls or huddled near victims, their eyes on Emily. Some spoke softly among themselves. "She's a nurse. She's keeping them alive. She's not even scared." If only they knew. Inside, Emily was terrified. Every second felt like a tightrope, one wrong move away from disaster. Her mind replayed medical lessons, triage drills, snatches of experience from chaotic A nights. But this was different. No sterile rooms, no monitors, no sterile gloves. Just chaos, blood, and faith that her hands knew what to do. Still, her voice didn't betray her. Each order she gave sounded sharp, certain, carrying authority even she didn't recognize. Keep him warm. Don't stop pressing. Talk to him. Don't let him fade. And people listened. The tote bag lay empty beside her now, its fabric stained. She stared at it for a heartbeat, remembering how light-hearted the morning had felt when she first swung it over her shoulder. It was supposed to carry fruit, candles, bread. Instead, it had carried lives. Her eyes burned. She brushed her sleeve across her face, leaving a streak of blood across her cheek. "Emily!" Rachel's voice rang out suddenly. Emily turned, startled. Her sister had been pushed back in the initial chaos, hiding behind an overturned table. Now she ran forward, eyes wide with fear. "Are you hurt?" Emily shook her head quickly. "I'm okay. But stay back. Don't distract me." Rachel froze, torn between relief and panic. She looked around at the scene Emily crouched in. Blood, strangers hanging on her every word, 4 lives tethered to her presence. For the first time, Rachel saw her sister not just as Emily the nurse, or Emily the tired young woman who needed coaxing out of bed, but Emily the anchor of this nightmare. Her eyes filled with tears. "You're saving them." Emily swallowed, hard, unable to answer. She turned back to the elderly man, focusing on his shallow breaths. Minutes stretched like hours. Sirens grew louder, filling the square, but Emily didn't dare slow down. She kept checking pulses, tightening makeshift bandages, whispering words of reassurance. Each movement carried weight. Each second mattered. And though fear gnawed at her, though exhaustion pulled at her bones, she didn't falter. Because she wasn't supposed to be here. And yet, here she was, the difference between life and death for 4 strangers, who might never have seen another morning, if not for her presence. The wail of sirens was no longer a distant promise. It was here, loud, urgent, rising above the tense quiet of the square. Blue and red lights ricocheted off the market stalls as emergency vehicles screeched to a halt. Doors slammed, boots pounded. Pavement, and suddenly the world was awash with uniforms. Emily exhaled, a sound that trembled on its way out. Relief surged through her so hard her knees weakened, but she didn't collapse. Not yet, not while 4 lives still clung to her voice. Her hands, her makeshift bandages. "Over here," she shouted, waving one blood-streaked arm. Her voice cracked, but carried. 2 paramedics sprinted toward the group. Their eyes swept over the scene in seconds, taking in the chest wound, the pale elderly man, the boy with the bandaged arm, the bloodied leg. They didn't ask questions. They just moved, kneeling, opening kits, pulling out supplies Emily had longed for since the shot first rang out. Pulse? One medic barked, crouching by the elderly man. "Weak." "Thready," Emily answered instantly. Her voice was sharp, clinical, as if she were back in a hospital shift. "He's been drifting." Elevated legs. "I've kept him warm." The medic gave a quick nod, impressed. "You did good. We've got him now." Another medic knelt by the chest wound victim. "Pressure?" "Still applied," Emily said, gesturing to the trembling teenager. "Bleeding slowed, but he's unstable." The paramedic eased the boy aside. "You saved his life," Emily shook her head. "I just bought time." But inside, the words lodged like a weight. She had bought time. And in those fragile minutes, time had meant everything. As professionals took over, Emily felt her body sway. The adrenaline that had carried her was slipping away, leaving her hollow, drained. She pressed a hand against the pavement to steady herself. Rachel appeared at her side, sliding an arm around her shoulders. "Sit, Emmy, please." "I can't," Emily whispered. Her eyes tracked the paramedics as they worked. Tubes, monitors, oxygen masks, all the things she had wished for were finally here. Not until her sentence trailed off. She didn't know how to finish it. Not until what? Not until they were safe? Not until she let go? A paramedic knelt briefly in front of her, glancing at the empty tote bag, the makeshift dressings, the bloody scarf. "You a nurse?" Emily nodded faintly. He gave her a long look. "You held the line. They'll live because of you." Then he was gone, sliding back into the storm of treatment. His words echoed inside her, sharp and heavy. All at once. You held the line. She had never thought of herself that way. Nurses worked in hospitals, not open-air markets. They clocked shifts, checked charts, soothed patients through routine and chaos alike. They didn't improvise with breadcloths and belts while waiting for backup. Her legs finally gave out. Rachel guided her to sit on the curb. Emily buried her face in her bloodied hands, inhaling the copper tongue that clung to her skin. The sounds of medical work continued around her clipped orders, the hiss of oxygen, the steady beeping of portable monitors. For the first time, she wasn't in control. And that, strangely, terrified her more than anything. Rachel rubbed her back in slow circles. "It's over now." Emily shook her head. "It's not. Not for them. They still might." Her throat closed. She couldn't finish. But even as she spoke, she saw stretchers lifting, 4 bags hung, patients whisked toward waiting ambulances. The boy clung to his mother. His medics steadied him. The leg wound victim gave a thumbs up to the man in the cap who had held pressure so long. The elderly man, pale but breathing, was loaded carefully, surrounded by steady hands and oxygen tubing. And the chest wound victim, his color better now, his chest rising beneath a mask, was lifted onto a stretcher. The teenager who had pressed for so long sobbed openly as paramedics thanked him before hurrying away. One by one, they disappeared into ambulances. Sirens flared again as engines roared to life. Emily sat frozen. Each vehicle pulled away, carrying pieces of her effort, fragments of her strength. When the last ambulance turned the corner, silence swept over the square once more. It was only then that she realized how cold she was. Her clothes clung damp to her skin, her fingers stiff and aching. She rubbed them together, but the blood had dried, darkened, cracked. Her body trembled, not from effort now, but from the absence of it. She leaned against Rachel's shoulder, whispering, "I can't believe this happened." Rachel hugged her tightly. "You saved them. All of them." Emily closed her eyes. The images replayed anyway, the spray of blood, the gasps for air, the desperate cries. She saw her scarf, soaked red, her breadcloth stained, her tote bag emptied not of groceries, but of fear and courage. Her stomach twisted violently. She bent forward, retching onto the curb, her body heaving with the release of everything she had swallowed back for the last hour. Rachel held her hair, murmuring softly, "It's okay. Let it out. You're safe now." Safe. The word rang hollow. She didn't feel safe. She felt hollowed out, like she'd poured every ounce of herself into 4 fragile bodies and had nothing left to give. Yet beneath the exhaustion, a flicker of something else remained. Not pride exactly, but certainty. Certainty that when it mattered, she had not turned away. As police officers cordoned off the square, as shaken bystanders gave statements, Emily sat quietly, her hand clutching Rachel's. She didn't need to speak. The story of what had happened here was already woven into every life that had just been carried away. And though she hadn't been supposed to be here at all, the truth was undeniable. Without her, 4 people would not be on their way to a hospital tonight. The automatic doors of St. Vincent's Medical Center hissed open, spilling bright light onto the asphalt as the first ambulance screeched to a halt. Emily stood off to the side, Rachel's arm looped protectively through hers, as paramedics rushed stretchers inside. Even from a distance, Emily's eyes darted to each patient her patients. The boy clinging to his mother, the young man with the chest wound, the elderly man bundled in blankets, the leg wound victim. One after another, they were swallowed by the hospital's fluorescent glow. Her chest clenched. She had carried them this far. Now they belonged to another set of hands. Rachel tugged gently. "Let's get you cleaned up." But Emily couldn't move. Her legs were rooted, her gaze locked on the doors. She needed to see them through, to make sure they weren't just whisked away into anonymity. Minutes passed in a blur of sirens and shouting. Doctors in white coats appeared, snapping orders. Nurses guided stretchers down hallways. Equipment clattered. The chaos was organized, but it was chaos nonetheless. Emily recognized the rhythm instantly. This was her world, though tonight she stood on the outside. A paramedic who had been in the square spotted her and jogged over. "They're stable enough for intake, thanks to you." Emily blinked at him. The words settled like stones in her stomach. "Thanks to you. I just kept pressure," she muttered. He gave her a look that was half incredulity, half respect. "You did more than that. Don't downplay it." Before she could answer, he was gone, swept back into the storm of activity. Rachel guided her into the waiting area, where the hum of vending machines and low conversations felt eerily normal. People sat hunched in plastic chairs, some with bandaged arms, others staring blankly. A TV mounted in the corner played muted. News footage already. The market shooting was on every channel. Emily froze when she saw her own scarf on the screen, stained crimson, tied around a stranger's torso. A shaky cell phone video had captured her kneeling in the square, shouting orders, her hands slick with blood. The caption at the bottom read, "Bystander nurse saves 4 lives during shooting." She recoiled. "Turn it off." Rachel reached for the remote on the counter and switched the channel, muttering angrily under her breath. "They shouldn't plaster you like that. You're not ready." "I'm not," Emily swallowed hard. "I'm not a hero." Rachel turned sharply. "You kept them alive. How is that not heroic?" Emily stared at her hands, still crusted with blood, despite the quick rinse in a restroom sink. Her nails were dark, her skin raw from scrubbing. No matter how much she cleaned, she could still feel the tacky slickness between her fingers, smell the iron tang in her nose. Heroes didn't feel this dirty. Hours dragged by. One by one, doctors emerged with updates. The chest wound victim was in surgery, but expected to survive. A leg wound patient was stable, blood loss controlled. The little boy had a minor fracture, but would keep full use of his arm. The elderly man had been touch and go, but he was responding to fluids and oxygen. Each report struck Emily like a wave relief, mingled with disbelief. They were alive, all of them. Rachel squeezed her hand each time. See? Because of you. Emily shook her head, though her eyes blurred. Because they made it here in time. But deep down, she knew the truth. If she hadn't acted, they wouldn't have. As dawn crept through the hospital windows, painting the linoleum floors in pale gold, Emily sat slumped in a chair, her body aching with the weight of the night. Around her, the hospital shifted back into its usual rhythm. Nurses changed shifts, doctors traded charts, janitors wheeled carts past. Life went on, even as hers felt suspended in a fog. A doctor approached her finally, clipboard in hand. "You're Emily Hayes?" She nodded slowly. "I've been told you held those patients until we arrived." His expression softened. "They'll all survive." "That's not something we often get to say after a shooting like this. You gave us a fighting chance." Emily lowered her gaze. Compliments scraped against her skin, leaving her raw. "I just did what anyone would have." But the doctor didn't let her deflection stand. "No," he said firmly. "Most people freeze. You didn't." He rested a hand on her shoulder for a moment, then moved on. Rachel leaned closer, whispering, "You hear that? That's not just praise. That's fact." Emily pressed her palms into her knees, trying to ground herself. She didn't want to be fact. She wanted to disappear, to curl up somewhere quiet and forget the sight of blood soaking through cloth meant for bread. And yet, she knew she couldn't. By mid-morning, reporters had gathered outside. She caught glimpses of cameras through the glass doors, microphones pointed eagerly at anyone willing to speak. Survivors huddled together, some whispering about the nurse who kept us alive. Emily shrank in her chair. The thought of facing questions, of reliving every second for an audience, made her stomach churn. Rachel wrapped an arm around her. "We'll sneak out the side. You don't owe them anything." But Emily wasn't sure. Didn't she owe something? To the victims, to their families, to the story of what had happened. Or maybe her only debt was to herself, to rest, to breathe, to remember she was still human. When the elderly man's daughter approached her in the waiting room, tears streaming down her face, Emily's resolve cracked. "You stayed with him," the woman whispered, clutching Emily's hand. "He told me you wouldn't let him go." Emily's throat tightened. She couldn't speak, only squeezed the woman's hand back. And in that silent exchange, something shifted. Maybe she didn't feel like a hero. Maybe she never would. But to this woman, to that boy's mother, to the young man who would wake from surgery, she was something else. She was the reason they still had a chance to hold their loved ones again. And that, Emily realized, was enough. Still, when she finally let Rachel guide her out of the hospital through a side exit, when the cool morning air hit her face and the cameras were left behind, she whispered the truth that sat heavy in her chest. "I wasn't even supposed to be there." Rachel squeezed her hand. "And that's exactly why it matters that you were." The days after the shooting unfolded like a slow, surreal dream for Emily Harper. News channels replayed the footage repeatedly. Her blood-streaked scarf, her hands pressed over wounds, her voice issuing orders to terrified bystanders. People who didn't know her name called her a hero, a miracle worker, a guardian angel. She watched some of it quietly, numbed, while Rachel hovered nearby, insistent on shielding her from the brunt of attention. Emily wasn't sure how to process the recognition. She had saved lives, yes, but it had felt like instinct, a chain reaction she couldn't have stopped if she tried. She hadn't sought fame. She hadn't wanted accolades. Her morning had been ordinary, calm, predictable, until it wasn't. Yet reporters and local officials insisted on interviews. "Your story inspires us all," one journalist said, scribbling furiously in a notebook. "How did you keep calm?" What was going through your mind? Emily blinked, swallowing hard. I just did what needed to be done, she said. The words felt hollow even as they left her lips. Later, she found herself walking slowly along the square where it had all happened. The tents of the farmers' market were being rebuilt. Vendors swept up glass shards. Children cautiously approached parents, still uncertain about the world outside. The air smelled of fresh bread and peaches once again, but faintly carried the memory of fear and blood. She stopped in front of the spot where the first man had fallen, where her scarf had pressed against his chest. Emily traced her fingers across the cracked pavement, feeling the memory of each heartbeat she had kept alive. It was almost impossible to reconcile the gentle Saturday morning she had stepped into with the chaos she had navigated. A small voice called her name. Emily turned to see the boy she had bandaged, walking toward her hand in hand with his mother. The child's arm was wrapped neatly, his face cautious but bright. "You saved my arm," he whispered. "And Mom says you saved my life." Emily knelt slowly, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "You were brave too," she said softly. "You held still when it mattered." His mother smiled through tears. "You were our angel that day. Thank you, Emily." The words made Emily's throat tighten. She wanted to tell them it had been chance. She wanted to confess that she hadn't been supposed to be there, that the universe had simply placed her at the exact spot when life and death collided. But looking into their grateful eyes, she knew silence was enough. Sometimes words weren't necessary. At the hospital, the 4 survivors were recovering. Emily visited when she could, quietly, slipping in between visitors and rounds. Each one had a story etched onto their faces. Now the fear, the pain, the gratitude. Each hug, each tearful thank you, reinforced what she already knew. She had mattered when it mattered most. But the emotional weight lingered. Nights were hardest. Emily found herself lying awake, reliving every moment the way the blood had soaked through her scarf, the teenager's trembling hands, the elderly man's fading pulse. She woke screaming in the early hours, her body and mind replaying the frantic rhythm of that day. Rachel sat beside her one night, holding her hand. "You saved 4 lives, Emily. That's bigger than anything you can imagine. But you can't. Keep carrying it all inside you. Let it go when you can." Emily shook her head, tears running freely. "I wasn't supposed to be there. I should have been asleep. I should have—" "You were supposed to be there," Rachel interrupted firmly. "That's the truth. Fate, luck, timing, it doesn't matter. You were there. And because of that, 4 people are still alive. That's all that matters." Slowly, Emily began to accept it. Each survivor, each grateful word, each news story reinforced a simple fact. Sometimes the universe places people in situations they never expect. Sometimes courage is born not of choice, but of necessity. The city recognized her bravery. Officials awarded her a certificate of heroism. Local newspapers ran her story on the front page. Children drew pictures of the nurse with the red scarf. Neighbors and strangers came to shake her hand, telling her she was an inspiration. Emily received each acknowledgement quietly. She smiled politely, nodded, and moved on. Inside, though, she was still processing the exhaustion, the disbelief, the persistent memory of the panic, fear, and raw urgency she had felt. Weeks later, she returned to the market again, this time without Rachel's insistence. The stalls were fully rebuilt, laughter and chatter filling the air. Children chased bubbles, parents debated over flowers, and the banjo player strummed the familiar cheerful tune on the corner. Emily walked slowly, taking in the smells of fresh bread, ripe peaches, and roasted coffee. She paused at the exact spot where the shooting had occurred, placing a hand against the warm pavement. No blood, no chaos. Just sunlight and the gentle rhythm of ordinary life. She took a deep breath. A small smile touched her lips. She hadn't been supposed to be there that morning. And yet, in the way life sometimes arranges miracles, she had been. She had been the right person in the wrong place. And for 4 families, that had been everything. Her heart swelled with quiet gratitude, not for recognition, not for fame, but for the chance to have made a difference. To have been present in a moment when courage wasn't theoretical, when action wasn't optional, and when lives depended entirely on someone willing to act. She realized then that heroism wasn't always about glory. It was about presence, about doing what needed to be done when no one else could. Emily Harper, the nurse who hadn't been supposed to be there, finally allowed herself to let the memory settle. It was a scar she would carry, yes, but also a reminder that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when fate demanded it. And as she walked back toward the bustling stalls, toward the smells, laughter, and light of an ordinary Saturday morning reborn, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Peace, because she had been there. And 4 lives were still here because of her.